Good morning, everybody, and thanks for inviting me to this international conference. So the task I was assigned was to speak about the context of managing international migration in the framework of the SDGs, and particularly try to match these two things, reducing inequality and ensuring migrants' workers' rights. So, as the presenter of this morning have very well outlined, and I'm referring particularly to Dr. Zibas, migration is a key cross-cutting issue within the Agenda 2030, and there are different aspects of international migration that are being tackled by Agenda 2030. We can also say, by reading the Agenda 2030, that international migration and the international migrants, I would say the people, are seen, are focused in the agenda with a double perspective and a double challenge. On one side, there is the recognition of the potential, the contribution that migrants have to can give to global development, and there is a commitment, I would say, to enhance even further this contribution. On the other side, migrants are still seen as a vulnerable group and as a group that needs to be particularly helped, I would say, in and protected, because the human rights of the migrants are not respected anywhere as we would like to see. So there is a kind of, I will not call that tensions, because it's not a tension, but it's a double challenge that it emerges, I think, in my opinion, very well from the agenda. And then going specifically on SDG 10, which, as you all know, aims to reduce inequality within and among the different countries, I have just outlined, the different targets of the SDG 1 to have you look at the place where we can see the specific targets around migrants and around the safe, regular, and responsible migration and mobility of people on one side, and around the critical questions of remittances on the other side. This slide was more for you to capture that in the SDG 10 we have two specific targets around migration and international migration, but in reality this SDG talks about inclusive approach to the economy and talks about the elimination of the discrimination and about the promoting of the social, economical, and political inclusion of all. So the whole target is around inclusiveness and around the need to advance our economy in an inclusive way. But I think the object of my presentation is actually to kind of show that as the SDGs are interrelated, the target of the SDG 10 are also interrelated, because while linking migration and inequality, we know from some of the data that the ILO, the International Labour Organization, collected a few years ago now, because the latest data available are from 2013, that migrants' work had accounted for approximately 64% of the world international migrant population. So already 5 years ago, the vast majority of people that were moving across border were doing so for labor reasons. So we can say that work opportunities, economic opportunities are one of the key motivations behind international migration. Then of course people migrate for a mix of different factors, but economic rights and labor rights are very important. And it is normally that it is so because earned income from work is the most important source for income for everybody, for migrants, households, and for everybody. So increasing access to decent work boosts equality and ultimately contributes to reach target 10.1 that is sometimes mistaken for the whole of the SDG, for the whole of the SDG 10, that is by 2030 progressively achieve and sustain income growth of the bottom 40% of the population at a rate higher than the national average. So when we're talking about reaching SDG, the target 10.1, we have to think about that people that we are talking about, the bottom 40%, are also international migrants and are also people that are migrating. So this leads us to the more general question on how curbing the extreme rising of wealth and income inequality has to do with ensuring living wages and decent work for the world's workers, including migrants. And this is far from being happening. We have, as you know, Oxfam International has been very active on the inequality debate, and as part of the latest reports that we published, the Reward Work, Not Wealth, we have outlined how in since 2006, ordinary workers saw their incomes rise by an average of just 2% a year, while billionaire wealth rose by 13% a year. And at the moment, the wealth, the increasing global wealth that is produced in 1 year, the 82% of this goes to the top 1%, that is the richest people in the world, while the bottom 50% of the humanity saw no increase at all. So this data shows us that while the world's wealth is increasing, the most of the world's wealth and the most of the world's rising income goes to those that are at the top level of the social ladder and of the economic ladder, and does not go into the hands of people that actually work. As Dr. Zibas has already outlined, worse than that, we have at the moment still the issue of modern slavery in the world, and forced laborers that produce some of the food we eat, some of the clothes we wear, and they actually contribute to the world's economy while being enslaved. So we see a situation that describes us that salaries and wages are not keeping pace with increased productivity and economic growth. This is growth. This is happening in many, many countries of the world, and it is a system that fuels inequality, and it is a system that does not allow people that are working to benefit from the economic growth. And this is true also for people that work in different sectors, in tertiary, in the industrial production, but also in the food production. And here you can find an example taken from the from the food supply chain of cocoa, where less than 6% of the value of a chocolate bar reaches actually cocoa farmer. And this is a sharp decline from the 80s, when farmers were receiving 18% of the value created in the chain. So I just put here this example to show that the decline in the quota, in the shares of value that goes to the workers, is a cross-cutting issue across our society. This is leading us to the question of the working poor that now populate our society. And as we will see, they populate our society in the north of the world and in the south of the world. The ILO tells us that almost 1 in 3 workers in emerging and developing countries live in poverty, and this is increasing. And who are these workers? Many of them are international migrants. Migrants actually are often employed in temporary, precarious work, and while some of them do this out of choice, the majority of them do so as a coping strategy to provide income when formal work is unavailable, insecure, or pays too little to meet their basic needs. And again, women and young people are more likely to be in this job, and of course are more likely to be abused, because we are talking about jobs that are precarious and sometimes they are not formal. But why the rise of this informal economy, of this temporary and of this precarious work? There is not just a question of welfare states reduced in many society, or workers' rights not just protected in many society. It's also a question of related to the fact that these forms of temporary precarious work is benefiting some of the most powerful players in our globalized economy. Large multinationals can reduce cost by outsourcing production to smaller businesses that employs contract workers in the supply chain and in the production phase. These people work for the company, for the big brands, but are not employed by the big brands, are employed by its first subcontractor, or its second subcontractor, or its third subcontractor, and are easily considered non-critical, a cost to be minimized. In the end, it's the big brand that is able to control, that has the power to, let's say, impose the production costs, and the subcontractor are obliged to follow and to minimize, to squeeze more and more the costs of production. So there is a situation where the competitive advantage is playing out on the skin of the people that work in the supply chain. External contractors achieve their competitive advantage by lowering cost, and the most direct way of doing so is reducing wages. And this is the trap of the working poor that is actually affecting many poor people, but also, I would say, international migrants. Here, there is a statistic that I found very stunning. In 2016, the ITUC, the International Trade Union Confederation, stated that 50% of the world's largest companies maintain a hidden workforce of an estimated 1.16 million people in their supply chain. So 94% of the total work generated by these companies was hidden in the sense that was outsourced across many subcontractors, across multiple borders, and was more precarious, short-term, and with minimal protection. And this is the traps that international migrant people and migrant people are being kept into. I just wanted to highlight some of the examples that Oxfam International has collected in terms of voices of people around the world. We spoke to workers in Myanmar, which are not international migrants, but do migrate from the countryside to the big city to work, to produce clothes for global fashion brands. They earn $4 a day, working 6 or 7 days a week for 11 hours a day, and they still struggle to meet basic needs for food and medicine, and they frequently fall indebted. We have examples from Dominican Republic in the big hotels and reception sector, where most of the women from Haiti come to work as chambermaids. At least 90% of women workers in the hotel sector are harassed by both the customers and the owners, and justice is on the side of companies. So we have studied the situation, and we saw that as labor workforce, people that migrate from Haiti to Dominican Republic, women that are employed in the hotel sector, are harassed and do not have the means to defend themselves. We have example from the U.S., from the Mexican and U.S. border, from poultry factories in Texas and in other places. We have this testimony from an immigrant workers from Mexico that went to Arkansas to work, and in the poultry sector, that she said, we would arrive at 5 in the morning until 11 or 12 without using the bathroom. I was ashamed to tell them that I had to change my Pampers. So we have women, immigrant workers in the chain line in the US that are obliged to put on diapers because they are not allowed to have a toilet break. We have research in the European Union saying to us that migrant and young women aged 15-24 face the highest risk of working poverty in Europe. These are people that work but can provide for themselves and for their families. And as part of the working poor phenomena, the international migrants are the one most effective. And lastly, we have the example of caporalato, of the caporalato system in Italy, where you have a situation where women and men, especially migrant workers from Europe and Africa, are exploited through a system of gang masters to produce a good percentage of the fruit and vegetable that are on the Italian table, that are on the European table. And again, nearly half of them are women. So this is again a slide on the caporalato system. You can see that 60% of them do not have access to clean water or sanitation. They get working for 8 to 12 hours a day without a break for around 22-30 euros per day, which is half of the legal minimum wage. So you can see how this squeezing the cost of production, the cost of labor, the cost of bringing some of the food we eat, some of the clothes we eat to our houses is putting the burden on workers, and international migrants are among the most abused. So how we can try to reducing inequality and ensuring migrants' rights? We have seen that the two things are linked into everyday's world. First of all, there is a question around the need to data collection. We know, and I think we will also explore more during the day, that data, specific data on the issue of migration within the Agenda 2030 is missing. There are indicators, there are targets, there are indicators developed, but it seems like countries are not willing to go a bit further and to try to collect data that shows how migration is affected or not affected on the way to we have targets, we even have specific indicators, but at the moment the picture is very different, and not all governments are, certainly not mine, but I would like to hear also your experiences, are not really focusing on data collection that will help us understanding how migrants' contribution to society is actually valued, or how migrants' rights are or aren't protected. The second point is about ensuring living wages for people, because many countries have minimum wage, but in many examples, we know that minimum, north and south of the world, we know that minimum wage are just not enough to allow a person to live a dignified life. So there is a question of ensuring minimum wage are respected, but there is also a question to ensure that there are legislation that governments should take to ensure that people are given a living wage across the different sectors that they work in. And of course, there is a need even sometimes to enforce the laws that prescribe the minimum wages, but that are not put in place. So it's about, a second point, I think it's about the creation of decent jobs that can really allow people to live their life. I had a slide, maybe after, if the lights goes on, we can show that there is sometimes a huge difference between a minimum wage and actually a living wage. The third point is about protecting the rights of the informal workers, because even if there are examples from Malawi to Senegal to Algeria, or even in countries like Spain, where even in the informal sector, migrants workers and workers in general that work in the informal sector have a certain degree of protection, like trade unions for informal economy, or rights to informal workers to be unionized, to join the trade union, for social protection measure. And this is another important point. I would say for the European Union, it's time that also trade unions consistently focus more on protecting the specific right of worker migrants as part of the workers in general, but also recognizing that their status makes them more vulnerable and more at the risk of being abused. The third point I would say is about trying to protect the people that are undocumented or that have an irregular status across Europe, because they are particularly vulnerable and particularly at risk to be exploited. For example, one initiative that I would like to bring to your attention is the European Citizens Initiative campaign called Welcoming Europe, that is now running across Europe and has the task to collect 1 million signatures across Europe, and it's now active. The deadline to reach this signature is February 2019. And this initiative called Welcoming Europe is trying to overcome the challenge, among other challenges, is trying to promote an international petition for the setting up of a European law reform to allow that even people that are in Europe which are undocumented, which have an irregular status, can denounce the crime that they are subjected to. So this reform would guarantee more effective means to protect all victims of labor exploitation. Because one key point is that if you are irregular, if you don't have papers, you will not denounce people that are exploiting you. So this law, this European Citizens Initiative, is working to gain 1 million signatures to be presented at the European Commission, to tell the European Commission to do, among other things, a reform to change this issue and to allow people that are undocumented to finally claim their right, for example, against labor exploitation or against other forms of exploitation. So these are some of the concrete points that I think would be important to tackle a little bit the debate. But I would like to outline the message that if we have to take the spirit of SDG 10, we have to think not only about the different targets, but thinking about that reducing inequality would need cannot be possible if we don't ensure that workers are respected and valued everywhere, and this would also benefit international migrants. So it's the whole system that has to step up and work better for people that actually are working for the planet and for the economy.
Thank you, Elisa, for your presentation. We're so proud of you. If anyone wants to ask something, to have some curious, we don't have a microphone, unfortunately, if it's not working.
Okay. So, thank you so much. As I also represent trade unions. So, this was what I heard. It's really concerning trade unions. But I would like to discuss this minimum incomes.
Yeah.
We know that we're discussing at the European level about minimum wage, which is impossible almost. Minimum incomes, it's more or less to agree on. And what do you think about this at global level? Would it be possible to agree, and who would bargain on this, who are those players to bargain for this minimum income or minimum wage at global level? Do you have some ideas on this?
Well, I think there are a number of different places where discussions are happening around the issue of minimum wage and versus living wage. In this world, governance is sometimes an issue, because the good place to discuss this issue, and the most legitimate place, I would say, is the International Labour Organization, that has taken a number of steps, but of course, it's a UN body, so treaties take time, and sometimes they end up in adopting, voluntary guidelines and not compulsory guidelines. I think that some of the steps that were being done towards this issue were done at the G20 level, for example, which is already a good place, not ideal, and at the OECD level to allow at least for minimum income, for minimum wages to be discussed and agreed. What Oxfam is also saying is that sometimes minimum wages are really not equaling living wages. So there the steps has to be taken more at the national level probably, or at the European Union level for the countries that are in the EU, but it's time to understand that in a social justice perspective, if wealth is being created in our world, if incomes are overall rising in our world, we have to ensure that salaries and wages are keeping up with the productivity increasing. So that's the main point, I think. Yeah.
Do you feel optimistic about the situation? Do you have any optimism? Because the situation doesn't look very nice.
I need to read the Factfulness book actually to become more optimistic. I think that the situation is not. To be honest, I'm an optimistic person, and part of my job is also to be optimistic because I think that the situation can change. I mean, we have to analyze it, we have to understand the dynamics, but once we have understood the dynamics, I think we can change. Inequality was never so much in the spotlight. If you think about 10 years ago or 20 years ago, inequality was not in the spotlight. Now it is in the spotlight, and many political leaders are kind of paying lip service, if you want, to the need of tackling inequality. They need to tackle some of the different interests to really be tackling inequality. There is the need to tackle some of the different interests that lies behind this current inequality and lies behind a system that is benefiting few in front of the many. But I think this is the path where we are going, notwithstanding anything. And I think this is I think also to understanding more why people feel so threatened about migrants in their society and the world international migration, and why people see more a challenge than an opportunity to this phenomena. I think we need also to kind of shape the debate in terms of equality that is missing, in terms of social services that are missing, in terms of work opportunities that are missing, and to challenge the fact that decent work opportunities, social services are threatened, or that there is competition between migrants and locals for these services, because these services can be increased to benefit the population. It's a matter of political will. So it will be a long discussion, but I think that to talk about the role of the international migrants in our society and the fears that people might have on this present, we need also to tackle this issue of global inequality.
Thank you very much.